"Do you want something from me too, cowboy?" The Arapaho girl's quiet question. The morning air was cool and clean, moving slowly across the open land where the ranch sat. The sun was just beginning to rise, spreading a soft golden light over the fields, fences, and distant hills. Everything felt calm, steady, and unchanged, as if the land itself had learned patience over many years. For most people passing through, this place was just another stop, another piece of land with horses, cattle, and long dirt roads. But for the young Arapaho girl, this land was home. It carried her memories, her family's footsteps, and the quiet strength she had grown into without ever speaking about it. She started her mornings early, before the ranch became busy. Her steps were light but confident as she moved between the barn and the open yard, helping where she could. She did not rush, and she did not waste time. Her movements showed practice, not effort. She had learned long ago that doing things well and quietly often went unnoticed, but it kept life moving smoothly. She was used to that. Her long hair was tied back, her clothes simple and practical. There was nothing about her that demanded attention, yet there was something about her presence that made people pause when they really looked. She had a calm way of standing, a stillness that came from knowing herself. She did not speak much unless necessary, and when she did, her voice was gentle and clear. That morning, a stranger arrived at the ranch. He came in on a truck covered in dust, carrying the signs of long travel. He was a cowboy by trade, hired to help for a short time with work that required extra hands. To him, this ranch was just another place, another job. He stepped out of the truck, stretching his arms, scanning the land like he always did when arriving somewhere new. At first, he did not notice her. His attention was on the horses, the tools, and the people giving instructions. The ranch owner spoke quickly, listing tasks for the day. The cowboy nodded, listening carefully. He had learned that paying attention early saved trouble later. It was only when he walked toward the barn that he saw her. She was standing near a fence, checking a latch, her focus fully on what she was doing. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. No sudden movement, no strong words, just a simple crossing of paths. She looked up briefly, her eyes meeting his for a second. Not curious, not shy, not welcoming or cold, just aware. Then she returned to her task. The cowboy paused for a moment without knowing why. He told himself it was nothing. People came and went on ranches all the time. Still, something about the quiet way she carried herself stayed with him as he continued walking. As the morning went on, their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes she handed him a tool without speaking. Other times, she worked nearby, focused, steady, never slowing down. She did not try to explain herself or ask questions she already knew the answers to. She simply did what needed to be done. The cowboy noticed small details, the way she listened before acting, the way she checked things twice, not from fear but from care. He noticed how others spoke around her, often assuming she would agree or simply follow along. She never argued. She also never rushed to please. She seemed to choose when to speak and when to stay silent. At lunch, most of the workers gathered together, laughing loudly, sharing stories. She sat slightly apart, eating quietly, watching the land more than the people. The cowboy found himself glancing in her direction without meaning to. He wondered if she preferred being alone or if she had simply learned that it was easier that way. When someone asked her a question, she answered politely and directly. No extra words, no apology for taking up space. Her calm confidence was different from anything he had seen before. He thought about speaking to her just to be friendly, but something stopped him. It wasn't fear. It was a sense that this was not a person who welcomed casual words without purpose, so he waited. In the afternoon, the work grew heavier. The sun climbed higher and the dust rose with every step. Sweat soaked into clothes and muscles began to ache. The cowboy was used to this kind of labor, but he noticed that she never complained. When others slowed down, she kept the same pace. Not fast, not slow, steady. At one point, a horse grew restless. The cowboy moved quickly, but before he could act, she stepped in calmly, speaking softly to the animal. Her presence alone seemed to settle it. The moment passed, quiet and simple. She walked away as if nothing unusual had happened. That was when he truly noticed her, not because she had done something impressive, but because she had done it without asking for recognition. He realized she had likely learned this skill not from lessons, but from life itself. As the day drew closer to evening, the cowboy found himself working near her again. This time, they exchanged a few words about the task at hand. Simple instructions, simple answers. Yet the exchange felt different from others he had that day. There was no need to explain or impress, just understanding. He asked her name. She gave it. He told her his. That was all. When the work ended, the sky was painted with soft colors as the sun lowered. The ranch grew quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels earned. People drifted away to rest. She stayed behind for a moment, checking one last thing before heading home. The cowboy watched her walk away, her steps unhurried. He felt no strong emotion he could name. Just a sense that this meeting, unnoticed by most, had meaning he did not yet understand. For her, the day ended like many others. Work done. Responsibilities met. Another stranger passing through her world. She had learned not to expect much from such moments. Still, somewhere deep inside, she noted how he had not pushed conversation, not looked at her as something to take or claim. It was small, but it mattered. Neither of them knew it yet, but this quiet beginning, this simple crossing of paths, would stay with them both. Not because of what was said, but because of what was not. The next morning began much like the one before it. The land woke slowly, with the same soft wind moving through the grass and the same quiet sounds of animals starting their day. For the Arapaho girl, routine was comfort. She believed that steady habits kept life balanced. She rose early, washed her face with cool water and stepped outside while the sky was still pale. As she worked, her thoughts stayed close to the present. She had learned not to drift too far into memory unless she was ready. The past was always there, resting just beneath the surface, shaped by lessons she did not choose but accepted. People often thought silence meant emptiness, but for her, silence was full. It held careful thinking, watching, and remembering. She had grown up hearing stories from her elders, not stories meant to entertain, but ones meant to teach. They spoke of respect, of patience, and of knowing when to speak and when to listen. She carried those teachings with her, even when the world around her moved too fast to notice them. As the ranch slowly filled with noise, she noticed the cowboy again. He arrived early, just like her. This time, he gave a small nod instead of words. She returned it without changing her pace. It felt natural, unforced. Throughout the day, she continued her work, but her awareness sharpened. Not because she was watching him closely, but because she always noticed changes in her surroundings. She saw how he listened when others spoke, how he did not interrupt or rush. She noticed that he did his share of work without complaint, and when something was unclear, he asked questions instead of guessing. Still, she kept her distance. She had learned that closeness came with expectations. Many people believed that being kind meant she owed them something in return. A smile, a story, her time. Over the years, she had learned to protect herself by giving only what was necessary. Her caution was not built from bitterness, but from experience. Too many times, people had approached her with curiosity that turned into judgment. Others treated her heritage like something interesting to study, rather than something living and personal. She had learned to recognize the signs early. During a short break, she sat beneath a tree, resting her hands. Her thoughts drifted to her family. They had taught her strength through action, not words. When times were hard, they worked harder. When misunderstandings arose, they stood firm without raising their voices. She remembered moments when outsiders came with smiles that faded quickly when they did not get what they expected. Those moments taught her to ask questions carefully, to observe before trusting. Later that afternoon, the cowboy found himself working near her again. The task required two people, and there was no avoiding shared space. They worked side by side, exchanging only what was needed to get the job done. He noticed her focus, how she stayed present. He thought about how often people tried to fill silence with unnecessary talk. With her, silence felt comfortable. It did not demand anything. At one point, he made a small mistake, nothing serious but enough to slow things down. Before he could apologize, she gently pointed out the correction. Her tone was calm, not critical. He thanked her, and they continued. That simple exchange stayed with him. He realized she was not trying to impress or assert control. She simply wanted things done properly. As the day went on, the cowboy found himself thinking about her background. He did not ask directly. He had learned that some questions, even when asked politely, could carry weight. Instead, he paid attention to how she moved, how she handled responsibility, how others treated her. Some spoke over her. Some assumed she would agree. She never reacted with anger. She waited, then spoke when it mattered. Her words were brief, but they often redirected the conversation. In the late afternoon, a visitor arrived at the ranch, someone unfamiliar. The mood shifted slightly. The Arapaho girl felt it immediately. She had always been sensitive to changes in energy, in tone. She stayed alert but calm. The visitor spoke loudly, asking questions without waiting for answers. He looked around as if the place belonged to him. When his eyes landed on her, they lingered longer than necessary. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, a quiet reminder to stay guarded. The cowboy noticed it too. He did not step in dramatically. He simply placed himself slightly closer, continuing his work as if nothing was wrong. It was a small action, barely noticeable, but it mattered. The visitor moved on, attention shifting elsewhere. The tension faded. She did not look at the cowboy, but she noticed what he had done. She did not thank him. She did not need to. Moments like that did not require words. As the sun lowered, casting long shadows, the work slowed. The ranch returned to its familiar rhythm. She finished her tasks and prepared to leave. Before she walked away, the cowboy spoke quietly, careful not to interrupt her movement. He said something simple about the work going well that day. Nothing personal, nothing demanding. She paused for a brief moment, then replied. Her answer was short, but her tone was steady. There was no barrier in her voice, but no invitation either, just honesty. That night, as she walked home, she reflected on the day. She did not replay conversations or imagine possibilities. Instead, she measured actions. She thought about how he had not crossed lines, how he had noticed without staring, how he had helped without expecting thanks. She reminded herself not to assume too much. One day did not define a person. Trust was built slowly, like the land itself, shaped by time and weather. For the cowboy, the evening brought rest but not sleep right away. He thought about the ranch, the work, and the people. His thoughts returned to her, not in a way that felt possessive but curious. He realized that she carried a history he did not know, and that knowing it was not his right to demand. He understood that respect sometimes meant staying quiet. As days passed, a pattern formed. They worked near each other, often sharing space without forcing connection. Each interaction remained simple, grounded. No expectations were spoken. No promises were made. Yet beneath the surface, something was slowly taking shape. Not attraction built on excitement, but awareness built on respect. They were learning each other through patience. She continued to carry her history alone, but she noticed that with him, she did not feel the need to shrink or explain. That realization surprised her. He continued his work, learning that presence mattered more than words. He began to understand that not everything meaningful announced itself loudly. Neither of them knew where this path would lead. They only knew that something quiet and honest was unfolding, shaped by restraint, understanding, and the space between words. The day began like many others, steady and calm, but there was a feeling in the air that something small yet important was waiting to happen. The sky was clear, and the wind moved gently across the land, carrying familiar sounds. For the Arapaho girl, routine helped her stay grounded. She focused on the work in front of her, letting her hands stay busy while her thoughts remained quiet. She had learned over time that moments did not always announce themselves. The most meaningful ones often arrived quietly, hidden inside ordinary days. She did not search for them. She simply stayed aware. The cowboy arrived early again. By now, his presence had become part of the rhythm of the ranch. He did not stand out because he was loud or demanding, but because he fit into the work without forcing his way in. He greeted others with a nod or a short word, then got to work. They crossed paths several times that morning. Nothing unusual happened. No long talks, no dramatic looks, just shared space and shared effort. Still, the girl felt a slight tightening inside her chest, not from fear but from awareness. She noticed how easily people could misunderstand quiet behavior. She had lived with that misunderstanding most of her life. As the hours passed, the sun climbed higher and the work became heavier. Dust clung to clothes, and the sound of tools echoed across the yard. She kept moving, her pace steady. The cowboy worked nearby, lifting, fixing, adjusting. Their movements began to match without effort, like two people who understood the task without needing to explain it. During a brief pause, they stood near the fence, catching their breath. The air felt thick with heat and the land stretched wide and open around them. It was a simple moment, the kind people rarely remembered. Yet for her, it carried weight. She had been thinking for days, not about him alone, but about patterns she recognized too well. People often began with kindness, then curiosity, then expectations. She had learned that asking a question early could save pain later. She turned slightly toward him. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet, almost gentle. She did not raise it. She did not accuse. She simply asked, "Do you want something from me too, cowboy?" The words hung in the air, light but heavy at the same time. The cowboy froze, not because he was angry or offended, but because he truly had not expected the question. He looked at her, seeing not challenge but exhaustion behind her calm eyes. He realized this was not a question asked lightly. It carried years of experience of being approached with hidden reasons. For a moment, he said nothing. He understood that rushing an answer would only prove her concern right. She did not look away. She did not look defensive either. She stood still, waiting, not demanding a response but needing honesty. He took a breath. He thought about his actions since arriving. He thought about the way he watched, the way he stayed quiet, the way he tried to be respectful. He realized that intention mattered less than impact. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low and steady. He told her that he did not want anything from her, not her time, not her story, not her attention. He said he was there to work, to do his job, and to treat people right while doing it. He did not promise anything more. He did not try to soften his words with charm. He kept it simple because he understood that simplicity was honest. She listened carefully. She had learned not to judge words alone. She watched his posture, his tone, the way he did not step closer or try to explain himself too much. When he finished speaking, she nodded slightly. She did not smile. She did not say thank you. She simply accepted the answer. They returned to work without another word. Yet something had shifted. The air felt lighter, as if a weight had been named and set down. For the rest of the day, the cowboy moved differently. Not because he felt watched, but because he felt aware. He paid attention to how he spoke, how he stood, how he respected her space. He realized that good intentions were not enough if they were not shown through action. For her, the question brought relief. Not because she trusted him fully, but because she had spoken her truth without fear. She had learned that silence could protect, but it could also burden. Asking the question had given her back control. As the afternoon wore on, the ranch grew quieter. The sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the ground. She worked with the same steady focus as always, but inside, she felt a calm she had not expected. The cowboy thought about the question again and again. He realized how often people moved through the world without considering how their presence affected others. He understood now that respect was not passive. It was a choice made again and again. At one point, another worker joked loudly, saying something careless. The girl remained calm, but the words landed heavier than they should have. The cowboy noticed. Without calling attention to it, he redirected the conversation, shifting focus back to the task. The moment passed. She noticed that too. As the day ended, they found themselves walking in the same direction for a short distance. The sky was painted with soft colors, and the land seemed to breathe as the heat faded. She broke the silence first. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. She said that asking the question was not easy for her. She explained that she had learned to ask it because too many times she had waited too long. He listened without interrupting. He did not offer advice. He did not explain his own past. He simply listened. When she finished, he said that he understood more than she might think. He said that trust was not something anyone deserved automatically. It was something built slowly with care. They reached a point where their paths separated. She stopped and looked at him briefly. This time there was no weight in her gaze, just acknowledgement. She wished him a good evening and turned away. That night she walked home feeling lighter. She did not assume the future would be easy. She did not expect change overnight. But she felt proud of herself for speaking when it mattered. The cowboy sat quietly that evening, thinking about the day. He realized that the question had changed him. It made him more aware, more thoughtful. He understood that sometimes the most important moments came not from what people wanted, but from what they were willing to let go of. Neither of them knew what would come next, but both understood that something honest had been shared, not a promise, not a confession. Just truth, and sometimes that was enough to begin. The days after that question passed quietly, but they did not feel the same. Something unseen had shifted like the land after a gentle rain. Nothing looked different on the surface, yet everything felt a little clearer. The Arapaho girl returned to her routine with the same steady focus, but inside, she carried a sense of calm she had not felt in a long time. Speaking honestly had lifted a weight she did not realize she had been holding. She did not watch the cowboy closely, but she noticed his choices. He kept his distance without becoming cold. He spoke when needed and stayed silent when words were unnecessary. There was no awkwardness, no sudden change meant to impress. His behavior felt consistent, and that consistency mattered more to her than any explanation ever could. Work continued as usual. The ranch demanded attention every day, and the land did not pause for personal moments. Fences needed repair, animals needed care, and tools needed cleaning. She moved through her tasks with practiced ease, her hands sure, her mind clear. Others around them noticed nothing unusual. To them, it was just another week. But between the two of them there was a quiet understanding. Boundaries had been named and respect had followed. One afternoon, the weather changed suddenly. Clouds gathered faster than expected, and the wind picked up. The ranch owner called for everyone to secure equipment and move animals to safer areas. The pace quickened, but panic did not set in. Everyone knew their role. The girl moved quickly, her steps sure even as the wind pulled at her clothes. The cowboy worked nearby, helping guide animals where they needed to go. At one point, the noise grew loud and confusion spread. Voices overlapped and instructions became harder to hear. She raised her voice just enough to be heard, giving clear direction. Her words cut through the noise without force. People listened. The situation settled. The cowboy watched her in that moment and understood something important. Her quiet nature was not weakness. It was control. She did not seek authority, but she held it naturally when needed. After the storm passed, the land grew still again. The sky cleared and the air felt fresh. Everyone slowed down, tired but relieved. Later, as they worked together to put things back in order, the cowboy spoke to her briefly. He thanked her for her clear thinking earlier. His tone was sincere, without praise that felt heavy. She nodded and said it was just what needed to be done. She did not dismiss the thanks, but she did not hold on to it either. As days went on, small moments continued to build trust. When someone spoke over her, the cowboy waited and then asked her opinion directly. When decisions were made, he made sure she was heard without putting her on the spot. She noticed these things. She also noticed that he did not try to stand out for doing them. He acted as if respect were normal, not special. One evening, after a long day, they found themselves sitting near the edge of the property, watching the sky change colors as the sun set. The work was done, and there was no rush to leave. The quiet felt earned. They sat with space between them, comfortable and unforced. The land stretched wide in front of them, reminding both of how small people could be in comparison. She spoke first, her voice thoughtful. She talked about how the land taught patience, how it did not respond well to force. She said that people were not so different. He listened closely. He did not interrupt or try to guide the conversation. When she paused, he nodded, showing he understood. He shared a little about his own life, careful not to take over the moment. He spoke about moving from place to place, about learning when to stay and when to leave. He admitted that he had made mistakes by assuming he understood situations he did not. She appreciated his honesty. It felt balanced, not heavy. As the weeks passed, the cowboy's time at the ranch began to near its end. The girl noticed the quiet shift in herself when she realized this. She had not expected to care. She reminded herself that people came and went. That was life. Still, she did not pull away. She believed that honesty did not mean attachment. It meant being present while something existed. On his last few days, they worked together more often, not by choice but by circumstance. Tasks lined up that way. They moved easily, understanding each other's rhythms. One afternoon, a misunderstanding arose between two workers. Voices grew sharp and tension built. The girl stepped in calmly, speaking with clarity and respect. She acknowledged both sides without taking control away from anyone. The cowboy supported her without overshadowing her. He stood back, letting her lead. The situation resolved without further trouble. Later, she thanked him quietly for that. He told her it was her moment, not his. As his final day approached, the ranch owner gathered everyone to say goodbye. There were handshakes, jokes, and well wishes. Nothing dramatic, just people parting ways. When it was time for him to leave, the cowboy found the girl finishing one last task. He waited until she was done before speaking. He told her that he was grateful for what he had learned during his time there. He did not single her out in front of others. He spoke privately, respectfully. She listened, then said that she was glad he had been there. She wished him well, meaning it. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to fill the silence. Then she spoke again. She told him that asking that question had been important for her, that being heard without pressure had mattered. He nodded and said that the question had changed how he saw things, that it reminded him to slow down and pay attention. They exchanged a final look. No promises. No plans, just understanding. As he drove away, the dust rising behind his truck, the girl returned to her work. The land welcomed her back into its steady rhythm. She did not feel lost the way she once might have. Instead, she felt growth. She had spoken when it mattered. She had been respected. She had learned that some people could meet her where she stood. The cowboy carried the experience with him as he traveled on. He did not tell the story loudly or often. But he remembered the quiet strength of a woman who taught him that respect was not about intention alone, but about choice. Life continued for both of them. Different paths, different places. Yet the lesson remained, rooted deep, like the land itself. Time moved forward the way it always did, quietly and without asking permission. The ranch returned to its familiar rhythm after the cowboy left. The sounds, the routines, and the long days stayed the same. For the Arapaho girl, life continued with steady purpose. She woke early, worked hard, and let the land guide her pace. At first, she noticed the absence more than she expected, not in a painful way but in small moments. A task that once took two people now took one. A familiar presence near the fence was gone. The space he once occupied returned to silence. She accepted it without resistance. People came into her life for a reason and for a season. She had learned that long ago. What surprised her was not missing him, but missing the feeling she had found within herself while he was there. The confidence to speak. The calm that came from being heard. The strength of knowing she could name her boundaries without fear. Those things did not leave with him. They stayed. She carried them into her days. When people spoke over her, she waited and then spoke clearly. When someone assumed instead of asking, she corrected them calmly. Her voice did not shake. Her hands stayed steady. She no longer questioned whether her words were worth the space they took. Her family noticed the change before she did. They saw it in how she stood, how she met people's eyes, how she no longer stepped back when it was time to step forward. No one commented directly. They did not need to. Growth did not require announcements. Seasons shifted slowly. The air cooled, the land changed color, and the work adjusted with it. Each change reminded her that nothing stayed frozen. Everything moved, including people. There were moments when she thought of the cowboy, not with longing but with appreciation. She remembered the way he listened, the way he stepped back when it mattered, the way he understood that respect was shown, not spoken. Those memories did not weigh her down. They lifted her. Far from the ranch, the cowboy continued his travels. He worked different jobs, met different people, and saw new places. Yet the experience stayed with him. He noticed himself moving differently now. He listened more. He paused before speaking. He paid attention to how his presence affected others. More than once, he caught himself about to assume something, then stopping. He remembered the quiet question that had asked him to look inward instead of outward. That question followed him like a steady reminder. One evening, while working at another ranch, he noticed a young worker being ignored during a discussion. The worker spoke softly and others talked over him. The cowboy waited, then asked the young man to finish his thought. The moment passed simply, but the effect was clear. He smiled to himself, recognizing the lesson being passed forward. Back home, the Arapaho girl stood one morning watching the sun rise. The land stretched wide and open, just as it always had. She felt grounded, whole. She did not feel defined by a single moment or a single person. She felt defined by her choices. She thought about the question she had asked and realized something important. It had never been about the cowboy alone. It had been about her right to ask. Her right to protect herself. Her right to exist without being expected to give more than she chose. That understanding settled deep inside her. Weeks turned into months. Life offered new challenges, new people, new moments that required strength and clarity. She met them with the same calm confidence she had earned. Not everything was easy. Some days were heavy, but she trusted herself now in a way she had not before. One afternoon, a visitor arrived at the ranch, someone new, someone unfamiliar. The old tension tried to rise, but it did not take hold. She greeted the visitor politely, listened carefully, and watched closely. When the conversation reached a point that made her uncomfortable, she spoke up calmly and clearly. The visitor adjusted their behavior without argument. The moment passed. She continued her work. Later, as she walked across the land, she felt proud, not because she had changed others, but because she had honored herself. The story of her life did not turn into something dramatic or loud. There was no single ending that tied everything together neatly. Instead, there was growth. There was balance. There was peace built from small, honest moments. The cowboy never returned to the ranch, and she never expected him to. Their paths crossed once for a reason, and that reason had been fulfilled. Some connections were meant to teach, not to stay. Years later, she would still remember that moment by the fence. Not the words alone, but the courage it took to ask them. She would remember how her voice stayed steady, how she chose clarity over silence. And the cowboy, wherever he went, would remember the quiet strength of a woman who showed him that respect was not something you claimed. It was something you practiced. Both lives continued, separate but changed. The land remained patient and steady, holding their footprints long after they were gone.